All right, welcome to your 3-minute crash course from Wiley Manager. In today's podcast, Bobby, we talk about progressive discipline. Let me walk folks through a little bit of what they can expect in the full-length version.
All right. Well, what we're going to talk about is we'll talk about setting the stage for doing discipline because, again, you got to do a few things ahead of time to do this well. We'll talk about how you issue warnings when things aren't going the way you want them to go as a leader. We'll talk about the progressive discipline meeting itself, and we'll talk about taking corrective action.
All right, now in the full-length version, we walk through these 8 steps. Let's maybe give folks a bit of a taster as to what those 8 steps are, maybe a bit of color behind each one.
Yeah, sure. Quite often managers get into this whole discipline process, and it's not a place that they actually want to be or are comfortable being, so they end up improvising their way through. Not a good idea. You should have a process. So hopefully your organization's got one. In the absence of your organization having one, Jed, you and I suggest one. So very quickly, the 8 steps in the progressive discipline process are, number 1, ensure the expectations are clear. Number 2, highlight the gap between the desired performance and the actual performance. See, you're over here. We want to be over here. Mind the gap.
Can you see the gap?
Can you see the gap? Step number 3 is issue a verbal warning. And again, make sure you're specific as possible there. Number 4, you may want to issue a written warning. And this is where you start laying out consequences. So do this or else. Okay. Number 5, issue a second written warning. So this is, again, it may depend on the nature of the infraction. You may, for example, if somebody goes postal, you may want to fire them immediately and just skip right to step 8. But nevertheless, if you're going through all these ones, this is what it could look like. Step number 6 is issue a suspension. And again, we'll talk about issuing suspensions with and without pay and why you might want to do one of those two things or another. Number 7 is taking corrective action, which could be a demotion or another suspension or a variety of other things. And finally, step number 8, when all else fails, you may in fact have to terminate somebody. It's a crappy job, but let's call it the burden of leadership, Jed. So those are the 8 steps in the progressive discipline process.
Those are the 8 steps. And also in the full-length version, we talk a little bit about having the meeting. I think some managers avoid progressive discipline because sitting in front of somebody in that meeting time is a tough space to be too.
Yeah, it's kind of so we lead you through that meeting, and we don't have time to talk about it in this shortened version, but yeah, it's definitely worth looking at. If you're hurling down this path, you definitely want to pick off the full-length podcast.
All right, and for more information and for that full-length podcast, you can get that at iTunes. Just search out Wiley Manager through the iTunes tool, and they'll find us there. Or alternatively, you can find it at www.wileymanager.com.
See you next time, Jed.
Thanks, Bob.